Oh, Bretto.
What's up, MP?
Damo just called.
Yeah?
He thinks there's going to be 100,000 people at the Wellness Summit.
Oh, again?
He thinks we're bigger than Michael Jackson, the Rolling Stones and the Beatles all put together.
Damien Christoph has gone completely mad.
Did you know he's made 8 tons of forage?
What?
And now he wants you and I to help him get rid of it.
Oh, Damo.
So look, being the good friends that we are, we've asked him.
You've been forced?
Well, we've kind of twisted his arm to make him literally give his forage away to 100 lucky Wellness Summit attendees.
So if you're ready to enrol for our signature 2 days of inspiration, education and empowerment...
And entertainment.
What do you mean, MP?
Well, Australian Idol winner Wes Carr makes his Wellness Summit debut this year, Bretto.
Wes Carr, you'll be guilty!
So if you're ready to be entertained, head on over to thewellnesssummit.com.
And get 4 value bags of forage muesli or 1 bag each of paleo, muesli, bircher and porridge when you register.
Now, all you need to do is register for this 2-for-1 special, bring a buddy, bring a friend, bring a family member or a colleague.
And then choose your forage selection, 4 muesli or 4 assorted, and get 4 bags per attendee. That's 8 bags per double pass.
That's almost $250 of forage for free when you register for the Wellness Summit on August 25-26 at the Collingwood Town Hall in Melbourne.
That's 150 serves of breakfast, almost 6 months of breakfast just for registering for the Wellness Summit.
Well, it's first in, best dressed. These 100 tickets are only available until June 18 or until sold out.
All the details of this special offer, all the topics, featured speakers and more are over at thewellnesssummit.com.
Thanks for making 8 tons of forage, Damo.
TheWellnessCouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Before we get started today, I'd love to introduce you to our new podcast sponsor, which is Fire Tonic. If you haven't heard of Fire Tonic before, it is a raw fermented apple cider vinegar that has a whole heap of other goodness in it, such as chilies, turmeric, garlic, horseradish, ginger, just to name a few. And it has this delicious, warming, spicy kind of aftertaste that just warms your stomach and your solar plexus and has you feeling amazing just by taking it. But aside from that, raw apple cider vinegar is immune boosting. It's antibacterial, antiviral. It will decongest whatever you are stuffed up in the head with. It's antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. It's also the best digestive booster. Apple cider vinegar is the same pH as our natural secretions and also stimulates those natural secretions. So if you're feeling a bit low in your digestive system, if you've got a bit of a sore throat or feel something coming on, it's great. I've used this before just to knock something on its head, like a sore throat or a virus that's gone through the rest of my family. And for me, I've just kept up with the Fire Tonic little shots, which I absolutely love anyway because I love a bit of spice. And it really does just knock it on its head. So it is locally made here in Torquay, Victoria, in small batches from a really ancient gypsy recipe. And we are absolutely mad for it. So if you also need a bit of a boost this winter that you can take that is delicious, digestive and immune boosting, then please jump on to hillbilby, HILBILBY.com.au and check them out. You can also use a special promo code for our tribe, which is Nourish, NOURISH 10, in order to get 10% off your order, just to give it a go. Bridget and I use it. It's on our counter all the time. So head on over to hillbilby.com.au/discount/nourish10 to get your 10% off and start loving on some Fire Tonic.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is Toxic Mothers, which is in response to a listener's question. Before we get there, I'd love to remind you to jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au and sign up to join our tribe. Once a week, we will send you an email with links to everything we've put out in the world and a little photo or wrap up of one of our weeks, which is just always nice to share. And occasionally we'll send you another email that might be a conversation Bridget and I have together or something that's happened in our family life that we think might be of interest to you as a woman on a conscious path. So join up to nourishingthemother.com.au with your email address and we can stay in touch during the week.
So toxic mothers. So this is this idea that perhaps your own mother was somewhat toxic, or a toxic person in inverted commas. And what that's really framing them as is almost like a dysfunctional mother, or a mother perhaps who was a narcissist, or who just wasn't able to mother in a way that you think that she should have. And there's a fractured relationship or a painful story as a result of that relationship. And there's, I'm really mindful of the labels and the judgments that are in that. What would you say, Jules?
Look, you and I have hashed out this whole toxic people thing before, because you do hear a lot of just eliminate the toxic people out of your life, just cut them off and shut them out and get rid of them, and toxic people are no good for you. And I guess I say it with a bit of humour, because if you are the universe, you can't run from yourself. And the more you run, the more you will run into yourself. And ultimately, everyone is a projection of you. So you can only see in another person what you yourself already have within you. So, you know, you can have this demonstrated by, you could look at any of your friends and pick something you love about them. And that's just a quality that you have within you that you're not consciously bringing to the forefront, and you're asking yourself to step up to. So you admire it in someone else. The things that piss you off about that person might not piss your friend off about them, because it's your projection and your trigger. It's not their projection and their trigger. And we get upset by people based on our own story and experiences and beliefs. And the universe very kindly brings them up to us to get us to face them, you know, like slap, pay attention, slap, pay attention, slap, you know. And so this is actually what a toxic person is. They're an unowned aspect of us. Now, I know that can sound a little, I don't know, kind of out there, or we're all one, blah, blah, blah. But you really start to see this pay attention when, you know, you can have an interaction with someone, you go, oh my God, that was infuriating. And your partner can go, that's fine.
Which is almost more infuriating, because you're like sharing my frustration here.
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
But that's
right?
just such a prime example of that whole thing, is that different edges, different triggers, different disowned parts. So what's pissing you off is very different to what would piss them off.
Yeah, totally. So when we're talking about toxic people, it's almost one theory of thought would be around the people that irritate you the most in order to grow the most. So as opposed to eliminating them, you probably want to hug them a little closer. No, realise that's incredibly painful and is multifaceted and layered when we're talking about a relationship such as the mother relationship. And I do really understand how much harder that is to embrace. Like, it's that old saying, you can't choose your family, but you can choose your friends, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And because it seems harder to love our family than what it does to pick the people that we want to spend the time with. But there's no accident that we have the family that we have.
No, not at all.
And they're there to rub those edges so that we can grow. So, you know, I don't know where to go from here, but one person...
I'm still, but you've still got me back at toxic people, because I think that there is merit in still labouring the point there, because I think people can still skim over and go, yeah, but she did this and she's like that and she always does this, and you know, yeah, I get that, but that's also so much part of a story that we all build up in our minds to make people a certain way. And I think about a story that I read about Donald Trump, and that he is in fact a manifestation of the broader collective unconscious. So the more that these liberal, progressive thinking people disown the parts of themselves that are racist, redneck, black and white, backward, selfish, the more that those parts become collectively disowned by a large enough population, the more they can be manifested in, in someone as powerful as Donald Trump. I mean, there's no accidents there either. And so I think that this whole toxic people thing happens in our, immediate world, and it happens in the broader society in which we're part of, and the broader world that which we're part of. And so I think that it's important to look at it in those two different contexts as well, to see how that plays out.
What do you think about toxic mothers?
Toxic mothers, I think, is almost more loaded, because we have so much story around the ideal mother and the perfect mother and how a mother should be. And when a mother doesn't fit that mold, doesn't fit that projection, there is so much that comes up around grief, loss, judgment, pain, that sense of that you're maybe owed something because your mother didn't mother you the way she should have, or didn't provide, or didn't listen, or didn't care for you, or all of those things the way that she perhaps should have, based on an ideal that you've got around how she should have been. And I think that is probably one of the most pervasive ways in which that toxic label can be put on someone, because if you think about the power of like this mother wound, which it's also tied into, that gets handed down generation after generation after generation. I mean, we have these epigenetic, lineages of pain and trauma attached to these maternal lines. And so that is also deeply tied into the wounding that we can feel around the mother that we think we should have had.
I think that was definitely me. I'd built up this pedestal of what a mother should be, which I then, when I became a mother, held myself accountable to and realised I fell vastly short. And I think that would doubly, I would spiral doubly as quick into pain and guilt and shame, because I felt like I was letting myself down as much as my children. So it was this kind of double-edged thing. And as, I've had more children and grown into my motherhood, I've really challenged who the perfect mother is and realised that there was no way my mother could ever, and still could ever,
live up to that.
Because she had to be all these things in order to meet my needs wholeheartedly. Yeah. And all those things didn't exist in one person and couldn't exist in one person. And if I wanted that one thing in this perfect existence of nurtured, nourished childhood, then I would not be who I am. And therefore I'm in a way being ungrateful for the perfection of the experience that I had. Because
and the perfection of who you are,
right? Because we are who we are because of, and in spite of, which is still because of the mother that we had. And to wish that they were different is to wish away who you were or are, because you would not have the value that you have on the path that you have chosen if you had a different upbringing. And I just think that's a really powerful point to realise, that there is not only one majesty in the way that you were treated or not treated as a child, that there are lessons and life-giving affirmations that you take with you for the rest of your life. So, for instance, I can speak of my experience because I don't know our listeners' experience, which is, I had a narcissistic mother, which I know is very much part of there's quite a few in our tribe that have had what we would class as a similar experience. A mother who was very self-focused, and, much more of the experience was about her and her experience of it, and her as the victim, versus the way that we would choose to parent, which is about what is our child's experience. And it would be easy for me to, when I did for years and years and years and years, judge how she had hurt me and how she had failed me. But where she'd failed, where had she succeeded? And she had succeeded in teaching me to be incredibly self-sufficient to the point where, it could have gone either way, but to the point where there's nothing that I won't dive in and do if I want to do it, or if I have a desire to achieve it, or a goal that I want. You ask anybody who knows me, and if there is shit that needs to get done, I'm the person who does that. And if there's a goal, it doesn't matter how big that goal is, I'll get to that goal. There is not a fibre in my body that does not doubt that if I have a goal, I will get there. And thank God, because I freaking love that about myself.
Yeah, that's a pretty awesome
And the older
skill.
I get, the more I realise how rare that is. Who do you think gave that to me? My mother. Because she sure as heck wasn't doing it for me.
Yeah.
So if I wanted or needed something, I had to work out how to do that for myself. And I did it.
Yeah, that's powerful, isn't it?
So powerful.
You know, like we hear so much about how to build resilience and how to raise a growth mindset and all of this, you know, perfect parenting kind of how to figure that stuff out. And your mum kind of gave it to you in a rather backhanded way, but she gave it to you, right?
I wonder sometimes how those sorts of the way that we're consciously parenting, what that ends up turning out like. I don't know. I wonder though, what is the definition of resilience?
Yeah.
And how is it fostered? Because it's not fostered in over support.
No, it's not.
So I do wonder that. You know, and my toxic mother who was, you know, bipolar, and she was up and she was down and she was emotions of 1,000 different shades within the space of an hour. You know, that was horrendous growing up, and I never knew where I stood, and I was always on eggshells, and sometimes she would snap into the most violent, horrendous rages, and sometimes she would be completely non-present and you would not know why, like, you know, but she showed me every emotion. So by the time I was 10, I already was saturated to my pores in emotion. Not in disconnection, not in confused understanding of emotion. No, full-blown emotion. So whatever the emotion was, it was sharp, it was crystal clear, and it was full color. So I knew emotion by the time I was 10. I could label emotion by the time I was 10. And what do you think I've spent the rest of my life dealing with? Emotions.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mum. And enough boundaries that I can say, that's your stuff, that I'm not taking that on anymore. That's enough now. And that has served me to no end in my career. Now, had I had the perfect mother who, you know, would tend to my sore knee and my sore heart, I bet you I would not have any one of those qualities. Like it wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
So was my mother toxic, or was she a full-bodied version of love that we just want to label as wrong because of the projection and the hierarchy and the cultural norms that we aspire to?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'd really like to reframe what toxic is. And I suppose on this path, one of our listeners' question is what do you do when the blueprint of your family is dysfunctional? And what we talk about in so many of our podcasts is, where is the function in the dysfunction?
I think we can be so quick to label families as dysfunctional, but so much of the very function of a family comes from what apparently might be the dysfunction and what apparently might be what doesn't work. Because the reality is, a family, if you've got this illusion of harmony, then it's exactly that. It's an illusion. You need that balance of support and challenge happening within a family all of the time to assure maximum growth for everybody. And so sometimes that will look like, you know, it's not functioning, but actually the wisdom is in the ribbing and the rubbing and the pain and the challenge and the, you know, everybody sometimes just not working in order to find how they do work again.
And the more you seek peace, what happens?
Well, the more you create war. It's almost like the same within yourself. You'll know this. If you're trying to be nice all the time, you'll almost get, you know, covered in rage, because you're a two-sided being, and a family is also a reflection of that too. A family needs a conservation of war and peace, and the only time a family's ever fully peaceful within themselves is when they're in war against someone else. That's usually what brings partners together, is when they're at war with someone else, you know.
And the purpose of a family is growth, not peace.
Yeah, that's right.
And we need to let go of the illusion of the peaceful family, the peaceful parenting, because the whole purpose of the toxic and the dysfunction has its function in growth, because we are a soul who is seeking evolution.
Yeah.
And we don't grow in over support.
And we stagnate when we're not, you know, bringing into the family, you know, important challenge as well.
So I would love for you to think about the dysfunctional family that you've grown up in, and just ask yourself, how has that experience shaped your drive for the things that are most important to you now? Because there's a function. And
what would the drawback be to you if you didn't experience that? You know, what wouldn't you have in your life? You know, who wouldn't be there? What wouldn't you know if you hadn't experienced those things?
I also love this point that you make, Bridget, which is if you don't think that the person who is your mother was, in inverted commas, your mother, who was? Do you want to elaborate on that?
This idea that, you know, throughout our lives, there's always a mother, father, sister, brother, aunt, uncle. Those people are always there, but they're sometimes in different forms. So, you know, when your mother wasn't being the mother to you, who stepped in? So who provided that mothering role? Maybe it was, you know, a friend's mother. Maybe it was a grandmother. Maybe it was an auntie. Maybe it was an old friend. You know, who provided whatever you see as mother to you at that time, because it will be there. It'll likely be someone that you weren't looking for as the mother. And then when we can start to see that, we can realize that we did have the mother
that we thought we didn't.
Yeah.
And also I think it just brings us back to we don't have to be everything all of the time for our children. And when we step back, who steps up?
Yeah. And that's what I think too, that the richness that as our children grow, what they can experience through their friendships and their friends' mothers, you know, and how those friends' mothers fill the gaps that we have, because we can't be all things.
No. Wholeheartedly, I feel that. When it comes to our sexuality, we want to look at the beliefs and the meanings that we've picked up as much as the ones that we've made up about our experiences.
In our Loathing to Loving program, we look at relationships to our family, partner, children, and feminine self, and spend a module in Nourish and Nurture, deeply expanding that feminine wisdom. Our Sensuality and Sexuality course is the next dive, exclusive to those who've taken part in the Loathing to Loving program.
The reason for that is the theory and the tools that you gain from Loathing to Loving underpin the knowledge of the psychosexual story that we build upon in our Sensual Sexual Deep Dive. For $289, you can join us in our exclusive Sensuality Sexuality course, or 3 payments of $97. We really want to walk you through loving your sexuality more than your sex life.
To find out more and join us, go to nourishingthemother.com.au/online programs.
So the last question this listener had was how to find the root of your triggers. What do you think about that?
I think that your kids will take you there. And I think that particularly if you have a strong mother wound or a label on a toxic mother, that those will be quite painful triggers for you. Through the mirror of your own children, and that potentially, depending on the nature of what you label as toxic, you will likely feel like you are on some level becoming that through what your children call you to.
Where they bring you to.
Yeah, so the edges that they take you to. So I think that you'll easily find those triggers. Finding the root of them can be more challenging, and it depends a lot on where those memories are stored for you, whether they're sort of pre-conscious memory or, you know, after sort of age 3. So we talk about age 3 as a key age because that was when the hippocampus area of the brain begins, almost becomes fully developed, and that's the part of our brain that stores memory. So before that, we have memory, but it's stored in a body sense. So the body always knows we can be regressed back to our birth by somebody skilled. Some people can even remember birth when they get into certain meditative states or other kinds of intentional practices. So yes, it's possible to get back there, but it often requires a little bit of help from someone. But getting to the root of those triggers, you can get there, and it's often about asking yourself, when you're in the trigger, when have I felt this before? And your intuition will have the answer to that for you. And the bigger that emotional charge, the harder that's your intuition trying to wake you up to see the other side of that, to see the full picture that you're not seeing. So I would really try to stay in the trigger longer. So really make safe that, rage, sadness, whatever that emotion is for you, by breathing into it more, by trying not to avoid it or shut it down, by just making it safe in your own mind, and then asking yourself and holding it as a question: when have I felt this before? and having that front of mind, and even reflecting, maybe journaling after the moment, and really being open to those answers coming. And because every feeling that we get is a messenger from our past. And so nothing is new. There is a root back there somewhere. And the more we can have those questions and be present to the answers of those questions, the more we're going to unravel what's there for us.
I think it's really important when we're dealing with our triggers that we don't make them wrong and feel guilty or shameful for them and kind of stuff them down. Because the more we kind of tuck them away, hide them in the shameful corner, the more our children will encounter response, increase their behaviour until the beast is unleashed.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a really interesting dynamic, because are our children in behaviour, or are they in response to our disowned parts, right? Like, where's the them and the us?
Yeah.
This is the whole thing of a dynamic, and none is more dynamic than the mother-child dynamic.
Absolutely.
So, I really find this fascinating is when, I mean, I certainly do it as well. I can be like, oh, I don't want to deal with that emotion right now, and I tuck it away. But sure enough, one or many or all of my children will do things until I get back to the point of that emotion, which will be heightened and more, I don't want to say aggressive, but more intense than what it was back then. It's like the lesson with the feather or the brick or the sledgehammer, right?
The more you've shoved it down, the more it's like...
Yeah, the more they keep stacking their behaviour until it gets to a point where it's like, rah, because your body is always trying to come back to a place of homeostasis. And so unconsciously we will be manifesting and co-creating situations in which we can bring ourselves back to homeostasis.
It's almost like, you reflect back into like, why did I lose my shit so quickly just then? And on some level, you either had a physiological or a psychological need to perhaps, even just to release something to get back into homeostasis, even when you can't figure out why. And that's also why it is wise to listen to those little whispers.
Totally. And I also think we're not in a culture that allows us or teaches us how to move emotion. Like, we're really not. We are not comfortable.
I think it's really in its infancy now. There's an awareness with children about labeling emotions, but it's, it certainly wasn't around when we were kids.
No, actually, it's funny. I was just having this flashback as you were saying that. I've been to a couple of funerals lately, and I'll just contrast a couple of experiences. One of my friend's mothers passed away, and she had her children in there. She has 3 children, reasonably similar ages to mine. And her youngest daughter, who's I think grade 1 this year, was quite close to her grandma. And so they passed, they went into the hospital to just be with her as soon as she passed. So her body was still warm. They were having time grieving with her, which I actually think is a really cathartic process. So her 2 kids were cuddled up on the bed next to their nana, just crying their little hearts out, sobbing away. And they're in a palliative care ward, can I just say, and the nurse came in and said to my friend, you need to tell them to stop crying because they're being too loud.
Wow.
And I just thought, wow, how uncomfortable are we with grief? Versus I went to the funeral of a friend from an Italian background, and certainly the nonnas were wailing. Like just a full-bodied wailing release. And I thought, how healing is that? Because you see that in certain cultural places, that there's this real understanding of the need to just release. And that is the whole purpose of ceremony, is to create, to give form to the formless. To create a moment that we can connect to physically and put that. That's what a funeral is. And yet I was at this funeral, and I happened to be standing next to an older, I'd say Australian couple, and she was commenting on how it was so unusual to have children at a funeral. And back in her day, children would never have been allowed at funerals. And yet this funeral had a lot of children at it. And I just thought, wow. That's huge, right? That now we're progressing in terms of showing children a way through grief, but we're still not there.
I think it's also, it begins even with like teaching children about like life cycles of plants and life cycles of animals, and it's a natural thing to be able to see life cycles of people and humans and life, to appreciate the depth of life and the gift of life.
Absolutely. I think it's incredibly a beautiful blessing moving with the seasons and having those discussions and having pets and facing death and birth and, you know, all of those hard conversations with our kids. But it does just bring me back to how safe is emotion for us?
Yeah.
How safe do we make our experience of being able to release? Because emotions are only a problem when they're stagnant and stuck. That's when they create disease. And I also think, actually, that's the other point, that's the other place my brain went before when you were talking, was our bodies remember what our minds forget.
Yeah.
And we never really forget anyway. We just don't consciously recall. But nothing is forgotten. And our body is always a place to access that. And we've lost the art form of movement. Not all of us, but, you know, as a large culture, you know we have the response of shaking to trauma to release.
Yeah.
You know, and yet we don't have that association to it yet as being healing as opposed to traumatic.
Well, yeah, it's almost this desire to get away from it.
Yeah, it's why we
feel into it.
Shake even after we've had a confrontation or, you know, we've had a surge of adrenaline and we're shaking afterwards. There's a release there. And I think even if you're in doubt with a trigger, which I know for you and I, Bridge, is true too, is that we can often move our way through a trigger. So I think I've spoken about before, I think shaking is one of the most primal, most amazing ways of moving emotion through your body. Every woman's circle I do, I start with shaking because it's literally primal. And so just to shake your body, you will be able to move emotion that you feel held by.
Yeah, and that perhaps you didn't realize was there.
Yeah. So even shaking, moving, sometimes you're going to hit points in your body that has a memory and you go, whoa, where has that come from? You know, and just being able to, as you say, breathe in that or move a little bit more or shake a little bit more or, you know, run on the spot, dance to some music, wail and scream. You know, like I just think there's a way to release knowing that it's a wave that washes through you and you'll get the answers on the other side.
Yeah, just being willing to stay with it.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is for our really big triggers, I don't know that we ever totally get to the super bottom of them.
No, I don't think we do. And I think there's a reason for that, because I think that on some level those triggers are useful for the evolution of ourselves. And to get rid of it or to unpack it completely would be, you know, perhaps in some of the disintegration of who we've built ourselves to be.
What do you mean by that? Can you expand that out a little?
Well, you know, if you think about our identity is so much formed by these triggers in relationship to what our voids are or what we've most perceived was missing growing up or even at birth. And we then spend our lives seeking to fulfill that to lose the trigger or to get to completely unravel the trigger, to make the trigger gone. I think the psyche would be unwilling to get there. I think it would require a lot of work to be willing to completely dissolve a trigger, because to completely dissolve a big trigger would be on some level, you know, having to remake yourself then, because who are you without that? Because likely,
without the void, you don't have the value.
That's right. You'd be breaking apart yourself to rebuild yourself completely, because the biggest triggers are often the things that we bury the most, but that are also what's keeping us going for what we're going for in life.
Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up our response to toxic mothers and what to do when you haven't had a wholesome blueprint for a family?
I think it would be really to just try to bust that fantasy a little bit more, and in terms of what you think, like, and really understanding how do I think it should be? Is that a fantasy? You know, am I trying to make my mother into some perfect person that she should have been? Or what? But the drawback is, to me, in my life now, had I had that? Because if I'm stuck in this feeling of this toxic mother, then I must be thinking that I'm lacking in something and that I'm not okay because she was like that. But it's really about what would be the drawback if she was everything I thought she should have been. What would be, who would I be then? And
what would no longer be in my life?
Yeah, yeah. to really start to bring awareness to what you're not seeing.
And I think there's nothing like finding the root of your triggers by being in the presence of that very person.
Yeah, absolutely. For everything that, yes, it's the best thing to do. It's painful, but it's so useful.
Is just to go into it almost like a practice, like a meditation, is I'm going to practice awareness of how my body feels.
And just that reminder of like, this is not that person. This is my response to that person. This is my feelings, not that other person's. To take more ownership of that. It can be really courageous to do.
Well, there's a whole lot of freedom in that as well.
Yes, there is.
A whole lot of freedom because you're not held by your story anymore. And therefore you're not held by the judgments, the prejudices that you bring into your life now because you can see the perfection in them back then.
Yeah.
There's a whole lack of freedom in that. So we would love you to connect with us on nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourishing the Mother on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you so much for listening, for your emails, for your responses, for your beautiful messages. It really does touch our hearts. And we would love you to come join us for Loathing to Loving, particularly if you've got a toxic mother story. It's, it's really, there's usually a huge mother wound on most people that choose a conscious parenting journey. So to really have the opportunity to dive deeply into flipping your perception can be life-changing, can create enormous freedom. It certainly did for me.
Yeah.
So you can find out more about that at nourishingthemother.com.au/online programs. And to connect with you, Bridge,
suburbansandcastles.com, and to connect with you, Jules,
is thepleasurenutritionist.com.
And Nourish the Mother to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This year, the Wellness Summit returns.
For those of you on your own health journey, you know that a lot of times it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and you think you're doing well and then something else pops up. It's like you're always learning. It's not something that just happens overnight and suddenly you're well.
If I actually had been so wrong about this really important thing in my life, what else was I wrong about? And it got me down this place of questioning all the concepts that I had. And then I came to one question, which was, who am I beyond concept?
When I was a little kid, I really always had trouble with food intolerances. I realised that there was a lot to be said for the way you eat.
You come to the same place that I came to, and it's a place of complete freedom.
Joe Witten and Fuad Kassab feature at the 2018 Wellness Summit. Bigger and better than ever. Tickets on sale Friday, May 4 at thewellnesssummit.com.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.